candidacy and whether or not you're supporting him.
I only get 1 minute for this?
Gee.
Well, let me start out by saying I'm not a politician. I'm not related to a politician. I'm not a career politician, and certainly Donald Trump has touched a chord with people. Somebody else referred to him as a battering ram, and maybe Congress does need a battering ram. Again, the crude aspects of it I can't endorse at this point, and certainly I don't want to even endorse anybody at this point, because I think doing an endorsement takes the voice away from you, the people. You know, I've been public about it. I've had problem with the endorsement process here in the county, and I think that the people need to be speaking their minds to come to primary and make a decision, and not the other way around from a party standpoint. I think it's very important. I would take the oath, if I have the honor of going to Congress, take the oath very seriously to defend the Constitution. It's not a suggestion that each and every person in this room has equal rights under that Constitution, and that's the way I would live out, my term in Washington.
Brian?
Like everyone in this room, I am watching and listening this race very, very closely, because we seem to be learning new things by the day. So I, like Mark, am going to wait to see how this plays out. I think tonight's going to tell us a lot as far as where the race stands, who's staying in and who isn't. With the passage of time, I'm sure I'll be making my own mind up as to who we will be supporting. I think Mark said he's not going to endorse. I'm certainly not going to at this point either, but I will be letting you know when I decide. And we seem to be learning more by the day, as I said.
I will support any of the three Republican candidates who make it through this process. I would support that water pitcher before I would support either of the two opponents. I think the question was about Trump. I think that ultimately, you heard it here first, folks, that the two combatants are going to be Romney and Biden. That'll ultimately be the ticket when they're done, because she's going to jail, and I'm not so sure where the other part of this is that it was a question about Trump specifically. He does scare me a bit, and now let me explain that just a bit. Should he be elected? Again, I'm supporting him, like I said, but my concern is that the people that Trump has attracted are at their wits' end. They're at the end of the line. And should he not fulfill his 40-foot promises, getting rid of everybody that he says, and doing all the things that he says he's going to do, those people are going to be extremely disillusioned. That's my concern with that one.
Andy, hold on to the microphone, and I'm just going to answer this as loud as I can, and say, how can you affect, if you're elected to Congress, the dysfunction that exists in Washington? How can you affect that one way or the other as an individual representative?
I know that wasn't his question, because it's really a good one. I coach cross country, William Tennant. There's at least two runners in here who have run. We didn't have many rules at Tennant, but we had two. Once you stepped on the bus the day of a meeting, and away meet, you kept your mouth shut and no talking. You thought about where you were going. Secondly, there's no sport like cross country where a home course is as big of an advantage. When we reviewed the course, you paid attention. You kept your mouth shut, eyes open, and no fanny tag at all. You watched where we were going. That's what's necessary in Congress. 80% of the people in the United States think Congress is in the wrong direction. There is an organization that believes that we ought to have a national agenda. Congress needs to identify, and the National Strategic Agenda sets four things. 25 million jobs in the next 25 years. The security, fuel dependent, and balanced Social Security for the 70 years. And there's one other one. We need an agenda. The way to show the American voter that Congress is worth something is state right out what we believe, where we're going. I'll join those forces.
Thank you, man.
So the question was, how do we clean up the dysfunction? Where do I start? So, being in the political corruption unit at the FBI gives you a very unique purview, a very unique perspective on the corruption problem and the dysfunction of Washington, D.C. Because for 14 years, we arrested, indicted, convicted, and sentenced corrupt politicians. So I know it. I know what it looks like. I know what it smells like. I can promise you that. There is all sorts of dysfunction. I think on a grand scale, what I can say is that politics needs to be returned to public service because it is not a public service anymore. It has become a self-service. Too many politicians, too many elected officials, too many administrators and agencies are self-servants. They are not public servants. Their goal is to get reelected. Their goal is to build a power base in Washington, D.C., to get that committee chairmanship, to build their fiefdom, and not to serve the people. And we've seen that time and time again. There are a number of things that need to be fixed. The gerrymandering of districts. We happen to be very fortunate that we live in one of 15 swing districts in the country out of 435. How sad is that? That few are legitimate 50-50 swing districts that actually matter every year. And there's a whole lot. My time is up, but this is a longer answer to this question. Term limits, campaign finance reform, zero-based budgeting, single-issue legislation. These are the things that we need to do to fix the system itself before we can even get to getting our country's problems solved in terms of legislation.
All right, thank you, Brian. And Dr. Mark?
Well, in 1 minute or less, I guess we could talk all different terms of our planks and various things that we would go and do. I think the number one thing that I would do is represent you. Not represent any political action group, not represent any party, but represent you. That's the oath I referenced before, and that's what I would swear by in bringing my principles down to Washington. That, to me, is most critical. You don't like that? Get rid of me the next term out. But that's what I stand for. I think, a lot of the items that were brought up are terrific to say, all right, let's go down there and clean up the house. But, you're going to be a backbench guy the first term or two, and you're not going to get a lot of political press, and you're not going to get selected on select committees. But if you bring down your principles and you stand by what you said to the people of Bucks County face to face that you're going to do when you get down there, and make sure that the Constitution is upheld, make sure that regulations are upheld. People ask me, well, what are you going to regulate when you go down there? I said, how about unregulating? How about freeing up the marketplace? How about allowing people to live their lives without Washington in your pocket or your pocketbook? That's the piece that I would do.
We're going to have a question, and several people asked questions sort of related to global warming, and we'll get Brian Fitzpatrick on this first. Do you believe in global warming? And if you do believe in it, to what extent should the federal government be involved in trying to limit the use of fossil fuels or limit the emission of carbon?
This has been used as a dividing point by people on the left, unfortunately. I think what we can say about it is the evidence is disputed. I think that's a fact. It is disputed evidence. So what do we do with disputed evidence? Should we take reasonable measures to protect the environment? Of course we should. Should we go overboard to the point where we're shutting down businesses, strangling businesses with regulations so that, that in order to comply with these regulations, they threaten their business? And I've spoken to many business owners that have told me as such, as far as the paperwork and the administrative burden and the cost. For marginal, if any, environmental benefit, no. So I think it's a question of being reasonable. We all care about our environment. We all love our planet, but we have to be smart about how we go about addressing that.
And we have a lot of questions, so don't feel as though you have to use the whole meeting. Pass the microphone over to Andy. See what he's saying.
I believe in global warming. I do not believe it is man-made or man-caused. There used to be dinosaurs in Minnesota. There aren't there anymore. Of course we have global warming. It happens. But it isn't going to be cured by a federal government that has 23,000 EPA regulations. That's the right number. And some of them cost $100 million a year to incorporate. We could do, take all the clean air, CO2 clean air degrees, and incorporate all that. Do you know how much by the 2,100, that year, do you know how much we'd have lowered the temperature? 0.02 degrees. The answer is not putting shackles on America's ability to produce our own oil and generate our own fuel. We need to do it and become independent. That's what it's about. There is global warming. Man-made isn't going to cure it, and sure as the hell isn't going to be cured by the EPA.
All right, that's Mike.